Before anyone else in your life ever controlled you, something inside of you learned how to control yourself first. I'm a national board certified forensic mental health evaluator, and I want to show you something today that has absolutely nothing to do with the courtroom, but everything to do with the one relationship that nobody thinks to examine. And that is the one that we have with ourself. Here's what it looks like when it's not ambiguous. A woman I'll describe to you as a composite, we'll say, of a pattern that I see more times than I can actually count. This woman grew up with a mother who screamed at her whenever she made mistakes, who went silent for days when she cried, who checked her homework not to help her, but to point out all of the mistakes that she was making, trying to find everything that was wrong with it first. By 14 years old, this woman had learned to rehearse and to proofread her own vocabulary before she spoke any sentences, whether she was at home or out anywhere else. She was constantly monitoring what was about to come out of her mouth next. By 30 years old, she was still doing it. Her mother had been out of her life for over a decade. The voice never left her. It just moved inside of her permanently and took over all on its own. That's not what we would call a strict inner critic. That's an internalized abuser using the exact tactics that were used on her. But now, 20 years later, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, even when nobody else is in the room, when nobody else is in the house, it's still playing. And coercive control between two people works through isolation, monitoring, restriction, and threat. This voice does the same four things, only with the doors locked from the inside. It isolates her from her own confidence by insisting that she's the only one who struggles this way. So she stops reaching out for help. She doesn't bother looking for any support. She gives support freely to anybody who needs it. But when it comes to her asking, she doesn't do it. It monitors her, keeping a running record of every single mistake she makes, but never acknowledging a win that she has ever. It restricts her deciding in advance without asking what she's allowed to want or attempt. This part monitors her and it keeps an ever running recording of every single mistake that she has ever made. And it never acknowledges a single win, a good day. It doesn't acknowledge any of it. Its sole purpose is to constantly replay every single thing that she has ever done wrong. It redirects her deciding in advance without even considering what is she allowed to want? What is she thinking about doing? Instead of being able to explore that, it's immediately shut down and the answer is no. And the answer is coming from inside now, and it threatens her with a consequence that sometimes doesn't even show up. The promise that the moment that she actually rests or says, I'm not really that bad, am I? Something's going to go wrong because rest or self compassion has never once felt safe enough to trust. And actually, a viewer who watched a different video that I made described pretty much that exact experience. She said, it almost feels like my brain is coercively controlling me and continuing to ruin relationships years and years later that are completely unrelated to where everything started. And just so you know, that is not unusual. That is actually a really good way to describe it. Because even when things start to settle down, boom, here comes that voice again. It shows up, it catches you off guard, it comes out of nowhere, and it can show up 30 years later, 40 years later, 50 years later, 10, 5, whatever it is, it can show up. So that's a really accurate way to describe or to put into words what is actually happening. And it continues to show up in places that people don't even expect. It can show up in a friend group where you're always the one who's apologizing first, even when you weren't wrong, because some old rule, this old programming that is living inside of you tells you that conflict that is unresolved by you specifically will end in abandonment. It shows up in work. You might have a job that you're overqualified for, that you won't leave because leaving would mean trusting that you deserve something better. And trusting that particular thing has never gone well for you. And then it shows up in other relationships where kindness feels pretty damn suspicious, and you find yourself constantly waiting for the catch. Like, okay, you just gave me a compliment and now I'm going to scan everything single thing about me. What was it actually a comment? Are you actually making fun of me? Do you really mean that? Is there something behind it? Are you trying to get something from me? Did I leave my guard down? There's all kinds of things that are spawn up when somebody compliments us, because in the house where the voice was built, compliments come usually with some backhanded remark or a punishment. So here's what's actually happening inside of your nervous system while it's carrying all of this. That part of your brain that stores emotional memory does not file the voice as old news. It files it as current information in the present tense. It is an active threat. So even decades later, your body still responds to your own self criticism the way it once responded to the actual real person who was standing over you. That can cause a spike in cortisol, a tightening in your chest, that same kind of bracing or shrinking, fawning or fleeing, whatever it was that you experienced. Those same experiences could actually still happen today or in a moment 30 years from now. And it's not overreacting to your own thoughts. Your body is accurately remembering where those thoughts came from, even when your mind has moved on. You did not build the voice, and you did not choose the voice, and you did not deserve to need to have that voice. It was trained into you a long time before you had any say in the matter by someone who needed you to be small, compliant, or endlessly self correcting so that they didn't have to do that much work anymore. And so when I say managing themselves, that is exactly what they do. They try to keep everything around them perfectly orchestrated so that they do not have to manage anything inside of them. They just keep the world as is. They often refuse to forgive people, and they're proud of it, because if they did forgive them, well, first of all, something happened, that something inside of them was activated. And then if they forgive the person because this thing was activated, well, now there's a chance that something else is going to be activated. So forgiveness is also very hard to come by with this population who likes to control. So, no, a child does not invent a survival strategy from nowhere. A child learns the room that they're in, and you learned yours perfectly. That was never something that you should look at as there's something wrong with you, thing that you adapted to. That's called adaptation. When your mind and your body, they sync up, they're reading, your senses are stellar. They're off the charts. You can walk into a room and without anybody saying a word, you can pick up on the mood, the emotion, who to trust, who not to trust. And that is also exactly why this can be really hard to catch in real time, because the voice does not sound like an intruder. It sounds more like you using your own phrases, even your own humor sometimes, which is precisely what makes it very easy to mistake for your own internal inner compass, or your whatever you want to call it, your own internal inner child. It's so easy to be confused and say, "Well, that's just me. That's how I'm talking to myself. It's what I do to keep myself on track," instead of recognizing that it's actually an old recording that's still running on a loop. And now, not every hard inner critic is this. Ambition, discipline, and a healthy conscience are not abuse. There is a huge difference between a voice that pushes you towards growth and says, "Let's go, let's get that," and one that never says, "You did a really good job." If your self talk is firm, but also fair, this video is not describing you. But if it is describing you and you relate to what I'm saying, I want to leave you with 3 questions and sit with them with a therapist or on your own if you feel like that is something that you can do, maybe even with a friend if you feel like I don't know if I should answer these on my own, but definitely try not to keep it bottled up inside of you. And I do understand that sometimes you is all you have right now. So be patient with yourself if you choose to answer the question. So the first one is, when you succeed at something, does the voice inside of you acknowledge it, or does it move immediately to what's next? What could go wrong? What you haven't done yet? Question number 2, whose voice does it actually sound like? If you're being completely honest, not maybe in the tone, but in the content, whose specific words are you still hearing? And question number 3, what would you have to believe about yourself to give yourself a break, to let that voice kind of rest? And when you hear it come up, to kind of tell it, not now. I've heard enough criticism, kind of not now. What would you have to believe about yourself? What's the actual fear that you have underneath that's keeping that voice in there? What is it protecting you from? And just remember, you didn't imagine it. You actually named it. The things that you have lived through have changed the lens, not your worth. If this described something that you lived, share it with the one person who would understand exactly what you meant without you having to explain it. And if you want, go ahead and hype the video. It's only valid for 7 days, the first 7 days that it's posted. If you want more people to find it, don't forget to like and subscribe so that you get the rest of the videos in the series as they come out, and leave me a comment. All right, so up next is the hidden reason that your family feels like a courtroom. And we're going to get into how this pattern shows up with your parents. I will see you next time.